Tonight we're breaking down the 28 dumbest decisions Harry Potter characters ever made. There are a few important threads to follow, but I'll keep the pacing soft so you can still drift off comfortably. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Think about the sheer weight of destiny that rests on the shoulders of the witches and wizards within the wizarding world. We are talking about a universe where a single whispered word can end a life, where time can be turned back with a golden trinket, and where the most powerful dark wizard in history was undone not by a superior spell, but by a mother's love. It is a world of immense gravity and ancient magic. And yet, for all the wisdom stored in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library, and for all the tactical genius supposedly possessed by the leaders of the Ministry of Magic, the history of this world is paved with moments of absolute baffling stupidity. When we look back at the 7 years of Harry's education and the decades of conflict that preceded it, we tend to focus on the bravery of the Gryffindors or the cunning of the Slytherins. We remember the epic duels and the heartbreaking sacrifices, but if we pull back the curtain and look at the actual mechanics of how the plot moves forward, we start to realise that the Great Wizarding War wasn't just a battle of good versus evil. It was a comedy of errors. It was a series of catastrophic lapses in judgment that, had they been avoided, would have ended the story in 5 minutes. We have to ask ourselves, how does a Dark Lord who has conquered death itself forget to check if a teenage boy is actually dead? How does a brilliant headmaster, a man who sees through invisibility cloaks and understands the deepest mysteries of the soul, decide that the best place for a magical orphan is a house where he is literally kept in a cupboard under the stairs? Why do the most dangerous artifacts in existence constantly end up in the hands of 11-year-olds? The stakes in this world are as high as they get. We are talking about the survival of an entire culture, the protection of the innocent, and the very balance between light and dark. Yet time and time again, characters driven by petty spite, irrational jealousy, or a simple, stunning lack of common sense. These aren't just minor hiccups, these are the foundational bricks of the narrative. If Lucius Malfoy isn't a petty jerk, the Chamber of Secrets never opens. If Harry takes his homework seriously for once, Sirius Black might still be alive. There is a strange comfort in realising that even the most powerful beings in fiction are prone to the same idiotic impulses that we are. But in the Harry Potter universe, a dumb move doesn't just mean embarrassing yourself at a party. It means accidentally handing the keys to the kingdom to a genocidal maniac. It means violating the International Statute of Secrecy because you missed a train. It means trusting a man who clearly has a face on the back of his head. Tonight, we are going to peel back the layers of these legendary blunders. We are going to look at the villains whose arrogance blinded them to the obvious, the heroes whose emotional volatility led them straight into traps, and the mentors whose obsession with secrecy caused more harm than the enemies they were trying to defeat. We are searching for that specific brand of magical incompetence that defies logic. We are looking for the moments that make you want to reach into the book or the screen, grab the character by the shoulders and scream, "What were you thinking?" From the halls of Hogwarts to the depths of the Ministry of Magic, and from the graveyard at Little Hangleton to the pristine drawing room of Malfoy Manor, we are tracing a path of poor choices. We're going to examine how the most brilliant minds of a generation failed to ask the simplest questions. We're going to explore the procedural failures, the information hoarding, and the tactical nightmares that defined the lives of Harry, Ron, Hermione, and everyone who stood in their way. Why did Voldemort insist on using Harry's blood for his resurrection when literally any enemy would have done? Why did the Ministry of Magic spend an entire year gaslighting a traumatized teenager instead of checking the evidence? Why did Hagrid think a 3-headed dog was an appropriate security measure for a school full of children, the more you look, the more you realise that the wizarding world is held together by Scotch tape and luck. This isn't just a list of mistakes, it's a deep dive into the psychology of error. We want to understand the why behind the how. We want to see how pride, fear, and a lack of foresight can turn a master plan into a disaster. We're going to look at the butterfly effect of these decisions, how a single act of spite in a bookstore led to a multi-year conspiracy, or how a teacher's inability to keep a secret gave birth to a monster. So, as the lights grow dim and the world outside fades away, let's step into the pensive and revisit these moments of pure, unadulterated madness. Let's look at the 28 times the wizarding world collectively lost its mind and changed the course of history for the worse. It's a long journey through the history of magical mistakes, and it starts with the most powerful wizard of all time making the most basic mistake imaginable. Tonight, we begin at the end, or rather, at the moment that should have been the end but wasn't. The Forbidden Forest, a deep and dark and tangled with ancient roots, the scene of a supposed execution. Voldemort stands before Harry Potter, the boy who lived, now a boy who has walked willingly to his death. The Dark Lord raises his wand, utters the killing curse, and Harry falls. But here is the horror that will haunt the rest of this story. Voldemort does not check for a pulse. He does not kneel. He does not confirm. He hears the thud of a body hitting the forest floor, sees the stillness, and he assumes. That assumption is the single most catastrophic tactical error in the entire Wizarding War, and it is born entirely from the blinding, smothering fog of ego. Let us dwell on this moment, because it is not just a plot point, it is a masterclass in how arrogance rewrites reality. Voldemort has spent decades constructing an empire of fear. He has split his soul into 7 pieces. He has conquered death, or so he believes. And in that forest clearing, he faces the one person who has foiled him again and again, a teenager, a child. And yet, he cannot bring himself to perform the most basic verification. Why? Because to check a pulse would be to admit doubt. It would be to acknowledge that Harry Potter might still be alive, that his own power might not be absolute. And that is a thought too fragile for a man who has built his entire identity on invincibility. But let us be precise about what the tactical insanity actually entails. Voldemort is not a fool in battle. He has orchestrated coups, assassinations, and a reign of terror. He knows that a fallen enemy is not always a dead enemy. He has used deception himself. Yet here, in the moment that matters most, he abandons every principle of wartime caution. The basic physical reality of a heartbeat should have been his first priority. Instead, he trusts the visual. He trusts the narrative he has written in his own mind. Harry Potter must die, and therefore, Harry Potter is dead. This is not a failure of magic, it is a failure of logic, and logic is the first casualty of pride. Now enter Narcissa Malfoy. She's not supposed to be here. She is the wife of a disgraced Death Eater, the mother of a boy forced into Voldemort's service. She has spent years living in fear, protecting her family by bending to the Dark Lord's will. But in that forest, something shifts. When Voldemort asks her to check Harry's pulse, he expects a loyal report, he expects confirmation. What he gets instead is a split-second betrayal that will ripple through the entire fabric of the war. Narcissa bends over Harry, whispers to him, and hears the faint thrum of life. She has a choice. She could scream the truth, and Harry would be finished. But she thinks of her son, Draco, trapped in Voldemort's inner circle. She thinks of her own survival, and she lies. She tells Voldemort that the boy is dead. That single lie is a catastrophic ripple effect. Because of it, Voldemort leaves the forest triumphant. He does not order a second check. He does not question his most loyal servant's words. He believes, and that belief allows Harry to be carried back to the castle, alive and to rise again before the final battle. Narcissa's choice is not heroic in the traditional sense. It is selfish, desperate, and profoundly human. But it is also the moment that undoes the Dark Lord's entire plan. A mother's love for her child, twisted, broken, but still present, outweighs her fear of Voldemort, and that is something the Dark Lord could never account for. Think about the layers here. Voldemort has studied ancient magic, the power of sacrifice, the intricate laws of soul magic, but he never studied the simple truth that a heartbeat is not a guarantee. He never considered that a follower might value their family over their master, and he certainly never imagined that a boy who had just walked into his death would be breathing seconds later. This is not a moment of magical failure, it is a moment of human failure. The darkest wizard of the age was undone by a pulse check he refused to perform. And here is the cruel irony. Voldemort's entire path to power was built on avoiding death. He created Horcruxes to ensure he could never truly be killed. But in that forest, his fear of death manifested not as caution, but as denial. He was so terrified of the possibility that his victory might be incomplete that he refused to look too closely at the body. He raced back to the castle, ready to crow, leaving behind the one piece of evidence that could have proven him wrong. It is the dumbest decision because it is so simple. A single check, a finger pressed to a neck, and the war would have ended differently. But Narcissa's lie did more than save Harry. It created a chain of events that would lead to the final confrontation in the Great Hall. It allowed Harry to reveal himself, to strike the final blow, and to end Voldemort's reign. And all because the Dark Lord, in his immense pride, could not bring himself to do the one thing that any village healer would do: confirm the death. Now, as we close this chapter, we must look ahead to the very foundation of Voldemort's immortality. If the pulse check was the spark that ignited his downfall, the kindling was something far more deliberate. The creation of the Horcruxes was supposed to be his ultimate safeguard, but it became his ultimate vulnerability. How could a man so obsessed with cheating death create such a fragile system? That is the question we will smash open in the next chapter, where we explore the Horcrux vulnerability paradox. Because the same ego that refused to check a pulse also convinced him that 7 pieces of his soul could never be found. We ended the first chapter with Voldemort walking away from Harry's body in the Forbidden Forest, assuming victory because he saw the boy fall. He didn't check for a pulse. He didn't confirm the kill. That single moment of arrogant complacency is the dumbest decision in the series, but it was not an isolated error. It was the logical conclusion of a much deeper flaw in his entire strategy for immortality. Because the Dark Lord didn't just fail to check a heartbeat, he built his entire plan for eternal life on a foundation that was spectacularly, almost laughably, fragile. To understand why, we have to go back to the very beginning of his quest. Tom Riddle was terrified of death. He saw it as a weakness, a humiliation that he refused to accept. So he did what no wizard had ever done before. He created multiple Horcruxes. 7 pieces of his soul, each locked inside an object, each acting as an anchor to this world. On paper, it sounds brilliant. Destroy his body and his soul survives. Kill him a dozen times and he simply reforms. But the reality is far more absurd. What Tom Riddle actually did was trade the possibility of true, unkillable immortality for a set of destroyable anchors. He took the most resilient form of existence a wizard could achieve and made it dependent on fragile physical objects that could be smashed, melted, or stabbed by a 15-year-old with a sword. This is the Horcrux vulnerability paradox, and it is the core strategic miscalculation that doomed him. Because splitting a soul into 7 physical objects is not a path to safety. It is a logistical nightmare. Each Horcrux becomes a potential point of failure. Each one must be hidden, guarded, and preserved forever. And Voldemort, for all his genius, chose to hide his soul in objects that were as famous as they were traceable. He used the locket of Salazar Slytherin, a relic every historian knew. He used Helga Hufflepuff's cup, a treasure that had been lost for centuries before he found it. He used the diary of Tom Riddle himself, which he gave to Lucius Malfoy as a weapon rather than a safeguard. He used Nagini, a living creature that could be killed, and he used the diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw, which he hid in the one place he thought no one would ever find, the Room of Requirement at Hogwarts. But he forgot that the Room of Requirement could be accessed by anyone who needed something hidden. The irony is staggering. Voldemort sought to conquer death by making himself into a puzzle that had to be solved. But in doing so, he created a vulnerability that Albus Dumbledore, a man with far fewer resources, could systematically dismantle. Dumbledore didn't need to defeat Voldemort in a duel. He just needed to find the pieces and destroy them. And Voldemort handed him a map, because every Horcrux he chose was a historical artifact tied to the founders of Hogwarts or to his own past. They were not anonymous rocks buried in the ocean. They were treasures that could be researched, tracked, and recovered. He might as well have left a trail of breadcrumbs leading to each one. And the most painful part is that he didn't need to do any of this. True immortality, the kind that the Philosopher's Stone offered, was right there. Nicolas Flamel had it. He lived for over 600 years, defying death without splitting his soul. But Voldemort rejected that path because it required trust and cooperation. He wanted to be the sole master of his fate, and that arrogance led him to create a system where he was only as safe as his weakest Horcrux. And that weakest Horcrux was a diary given to a child. So when we talk about the Horcrux vulnerability paradox, we are deconstructing why splitting a soul into 7 physical objects is a strategic nightmare. It multiplies your risks while pretending to eliminate them. It forces you to choose hiding places that are either too obvious or too accessible. And it ensures that your enemies have a clear, step-by-step process to end you. Voldemort didn't become immortal. He became a scavenger hunt. And that is the setup for our next chapter, where this flaw in action. Because the first Horcrux to fall was not hidden in a cave or a vault. It was handed to an 11-year-old girl by Lucius Malfoy, who used it as a weapon in a petty family feud. That diary would open the Chamber of Secrets, unleash a basilisk, and nearly kill Ginny Weasley. But more importantly, it would teach Harry Potter that Voldemort could be beaten. And Lucius Malfoy's petty diary prank? That is the third dumbest decision in the series. We talked about the paradox of Horcruxes, how Voldemort's obsession with immortality led him to create 7 physical anchors, each one a famous artifact that could be tracked by anyone with a decent history book. But even that strategic nightmare pales compared to what one of his followers did with a piece of the Dark Lord's soul. Because if you're going to entrust a Horcrux to someone, the last person you should pick is an 11-year-old girl who belongs to the family you hate most. Lucius Malfoy had a problem. He had a diary, a harmless-looking leather journal, but it was anything but harmless. Inside that diary lived a memory of Tom Riddle, a fragment of Voldemort's soul that could possess the person who wrote in it. Lucius knew exactly what it was. He had been entrusted with it for safekeeping, likely by the Dark Lord himself before his fall. And for years, Lucius held on to it, waiting for the right moment to use it. That moment came in Flourish and Blots of all places. He ran into Arthur Weasley, the man he despised more than almost anyone. Arthur was a blood traitor, a ministry bureaucrat who spent his days raiding Malfoy Manor for contraband. And the mere sight of him made Lucius's blood boil. So when he saw Arthur's youngest daughter, Ginny, standing there with her schoolbooks, an idea formed. A petty, spiteful, devastatingly reckless idea. He slipped the diary into her cauldron when no one was looking. It was a prank, really. He wanted to embarrass Arthur, to get his daughter in trouble, to prove that the Weasleys couldn't handle the magical world. But he didn't think beyond that. He didn't consider that he was handing a piece of Lord Voldemort's soul to an 11-year-old girl who had no defences against possession. He didn't think about the chaos that would follow. He just wanted to get one over on Arthur Weasley. That desire to spite Arthur nearly destroyed the entire Malfoy family legacy, and the diary did exactly what a piece of Voldemort's soul was designed to do. It latched onto Ginny, drained her life force, and used her to open the Chamber of Secrets. Basilisk roamed the halls, students were petrified, and all the while, Lucius sat back, thinking he had gotten away with it. But then Harry Potter found the diary. He fought the Basilisk, destroyed the diary, and exposed Lucius as the one who planted it. Lucius lost everything. He was stripped of his position on the Hogwarts board. He was publicly humiliated. Dumbledore threatened him with Azkaban, and what had he gained? Nothing. Not a single advantage for the Malfoy name. He had risked a Horcrux, one of the Dark Lord's most prized possessions, on a petty grudge. And when the diary was destroyed, the fragment of Voldemort's soul inside it was also destroyed. That meant Voldemort was now down one Horcrux, and he didn't even know it. The Dark Lord's immortality had a hole in it, and Lucius Malfoy had created that hole with his own hands. But the truly unintended consequence was something Lucius could never have imagined. That diary became the very tool Harry Potter needed to understand the full scope of Voldemort's evil. By confronting Tom Riddle's memory, Harry learned that Horcruxes existed, that Voldemort had split his soul more than once. That knowledge was the seed of the entire hunt. Harry didn't just survive the diary. He walked away with a crucial piece of the puzzle, a piece that Voldemort had never intended anyone to have. And so Lucius Malfoy, in a moment of pure pettiness, handed the enemy the key to the Dark Lord's immortality. The Malfoy family had served Voldemort for years, but this one act of spite nearly ended the entire bloodline. The Dark Lord would eventually hold Lucius responsible, and Lucius would spend the rest of the war paying for that mistake. The Malfoy name had been damaged before, but never by one of their own in such a foolish, avoidable way. And as for the next generation, Draco Malfoy would inherit his father's pride, his father's temper, and his father's catastrophic lack of foresight, which is exactly what led to a duel in a bathroom that nearly cost him everything. The previous chapter left us with Lucius Malfoy's reckless decision to slip a piece of the Dark Lord's soul into an 11-year-old girl's cauldron, a move driven entirely by petty spite rather than any real strategic gain. That act of arrogance not only exposed the Malfoy family to Dumbledore's scrutiny, but also set a dangerous precedent for the next generation of Malfoys. Because if there's one thing Lucius taught his son Draco, it's that power can be wielded through cruelty, through privilege, and through the belief that you are untouchable. But what Lucius never taught Draco was how to handle the pressure when that untouchable status begins to crack. And crack it did. By the time Draco Malfoy steps into the 6th book of the series, he is no longer the smug, self-assured boy who mocked Harry Potter on the Hogwarts Express. He is a terrified teenager who has been given an impossible task by the most dangerous wizard in the world, a task that, if failed, will cost him his life and the lives of his parents. The emotional weight of that burden is almost unbearable, and it manifests not as quiet desperation, but as a volcano of anxiety, paranoia, and rage. And that volcano, as we all know, is about to erupt in the most ill-advised location possible, a second-floor bathroom at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The emotional instability that led Draco to use an unknown, dark curse in a public school is the core of this disaster. On the surface, the confrontation seems like a typical schoolyard squabble. Draco, tears streaming down his face, is caught off guard by Harry in the boys' bathroom. But this is no ordinary tantrum. Draco has been secretly working on the Vanishing Cabinet, trying to bring Death Eaters into the castle. He is sleep-deprived, terrified, and cracking under the weight of his father's disgrace and his own failing mission. When Harry finds him and begins to mock him, Draco's defences collapse. He doesn't think. He doesn't consider the consequences. He simply lashes out with the first curse that comes to mind. A spell scribbled in the margins of an old potions textbook. A spell he has never tested. A spell that says, "for enemies," without any further explanation. And that is the first fatal error. Draco Malfoy, a student who has prided himself on his family's pure blood heritage and his own cunning, resorts to using an unknown, untested curse on the one person in the school whose death would trigger a catastrophic chain of events. He doesn't know what the spell does. He doesn't know if it will kill, maim, or simply cause a minor injury. But in that moment of raw emotional eruption, he doesn't care. He just needs to make Harry stop. The result is a deep, almost fatal gash across Harry's chest and face, blood pouring onto the white-tiled floor, Harry collapsing into a puddle of water and crimson. The spell Sectumsempra is a dark curse designed to slash the victim, as if by an invisible sword. It is not something a student should ever have access to, let alone cast in a high-traffic area like a school bathroom. And that brings us to the second critical mistake: why attacking the Chosen One in a high-traffic area was a mission-ending mistake. Think about the setting. The second-floor boys' bathroom at Hogwarts is not a secret chamber. It is a common area used by students every day. Anyone could walk in at any moment: a teacher, a prefect, a random first year. Yet Draco's attack is loud, violent, and leaves behind a trail of blood that no amount of cleaning charms could have hidden. Even if Draco had succeeded in killing Harry, there would have been dozens of witnesses, a massive investigation, and the immediate exposure of the fact that Draco Malfoy was using dark magic. His mission to assassinate Dumbledore relied on secrecy, on subtlety, on being able to move through the castle without suspicion. A bloody murder in a bathroom would have shattered that secrecy instantly. The Ministry, the Order of the Phoenix, and every teacher at Hogwarts would have descended upon him. His cover would be blown, his family destroyed, and the entire plan for the year thrown into chaos. But Draco didn't kill Harry. He didn't even come close. He left a wounded, bleeding boy who could now point a finger directly at him. And that is where the intervention of Snape becomes a crucial turning point. Not just for Draco's survival, but for the near exposure of the plan to assassinate Dumbledore. Severus Snape arrives in the bathroom within moments, presumably drawn by the commotion or by his own surveillance of Draco's activities. He finds Harry bleeding out on the floor, Draco frozen in shock, and a situation that is spiralling out of control. Snape is a master of damage control, but even he cannot fully contain this mess. It stands at the edge of the grounds, a tree that has witnessed many secrets, many attacks, and many poor judgments. But the Ford Anglia's crash was not the last time that tree would be involved in a catastrophic choice. Before the year was out, another decision would be made in that very shadow, one that concerned a memory charm and a professor whose greatest talent was not teaching, but lying. That story belongs to Lockhart, and it begins the moment a broken wand snaps open, a chamber no one was prepared to enter. You remember that moment in the flying Ford Anglia when panic trumped patience. 2 kids, a blocked platform, and a car that shouldn't have been airborne. It was reckless, yes, but it also came from a place of desperation. There's a different kind of stupidity though, one that doesn't come from fear, but from pure blinding vanity. And no one in the wizarding world exemplifies that better than Gilderoy Lockhart. By the time we reach the Chamber of Secrets, Lockhart has already built a career on stolen memories and borrowed glory. He's a fraud who has spent years charming his way through the wizarding world, wiping the minds of genuine heroes and taking credit for their deeds. But all that confidence eventually meets its match in a broken wand and a spell that refuses to obey. The scene unfolds deep beneath Hogwarts, in the stone cavern where the basilisk once roamed. Harry and Ron have just confronted the truth about the chamber, and Lockhart, exposed and cornered, decides to take matters into his own hands. He pulls out Ron's wand, a wand that snapped nearly in half during the crash of the Ford Anglia, now held together only by a strip of speller tape. It's a wand that can barely produce a puff of smoke, But Lockhart, so wrapped up in his own delusions of competence, doesn't bother to examine it. He points the splintered tip at the two students and prepares to cast a memory charm. Now, here's where the decision becomes astoundingly stupid. Lockhart's entire reputation rests on his ability to perform flawless memory charms. He knows the incantation, he knows the wand movement, and he knows that any distraction can turn the spell sideways. Yet he ignores the most obvious physical evidence in front of him. The wand is broken. The unicorn hair core is poking out of the shaft. The wood is split, and the magical channel is compromised. A wand like that is about as reliable as a sieve in a rainstorm. But Lockhart doesn't see it. He sees only an opportunity to erase two witnesses and maintain his facade. He casts the charm, and the wand reacts exactly as you'd expect. Instead of a controlled beam of oblivion, the spell backfires with a violent crack. The green light explodes backward, slamming into Lockhart's own head. He stumbles, drops the wand, and when he looks up, his eyes are empty. The memory charm has erased his own memories. Every stolen accomplishment, every fabricated adventure, every ounce of his carefully constructed identity. From that moment on, Gilderoy Lockhart becomes a permanent patient at St. Mungo's, a man who can barely remember his own name, let alone the spells he once claimed to master. This is the kind of consequence that feels almost like a punchline, except it's real. Lockhart's vanity leads him to ignore a broken wand, and in doing so, he gives himself a Darwin Award-level fate. He doesn't die, but he loses everything that made him who he was. It's a poetic justice that the man who built his life on stolen memories ends up with none of his own. But there's a lesson here that extends beyond Lockhart's ego. Decisions made in the heat of the moment, when you're so sure of your own brilliance that you ignore the obvious flaws in your tools. That's a trap that catches even clever people, and a few years later, a different character will make a very similar mistake, with a piece of parchment that reveals far more than it should, trusting a map that tells the truth, but never the whole story. Gilderoy Lockhart's attempt to erase Harry and Ron's memories ended with his own mind scrambled, a fitting end for a fraud who had built his entire career on stolen stories. But while Lockhart's incompetence was almost comedic in its collapse, the next mistake on our list is anything but funny. It is a quiet, tragic failure of judgment from someone we are supposed to trust implicitly, a lapse that ripples forward through the entire war. Remus Lupin had spent the year at Hogwarts as the defense against the dark arts professor, the first competent one Harry had ever known. He was kind, knowledgeable, and carried a deep weariness that came from a lifetime of hiding what he was. Lupin was a werewolf, and the Wolfsbane potion allowed him to keep his mind during the full moon, transforming into a wolf without the ravenous need to attack humans. It was his lifeline, and Snape brewed it for him every month, a grudging service that kept a monster at bay. On the night of the 6th full moon of the school year, the night Harry, Hermione and Ron had finally cornered Peter Pettigrew in the Shrieking Shack, Lupin made a catastrophic omission. He forgot to take his potion. It sounds impossibly trivial, a simple oversight, but the timing could not have been worse. He had just witnessed Peter Pettigrew's name appear on the Marauder's map, a name he knew was supposed to belong to a dead man. He had seen Sirius Black too, and understood the truth that had been buried for 12 years. Pettigrew was alive, and Sirius was innocent. Lupin's anger and urgency overrode everything else. He had spent years believing his old friend had betrayed James and Lily, and now the proof was in front of him. He ran into the passageway under the Whomping Willow, clutching the map, barely containing his rage. He did not pause to consider the moon outside. He did not remember the Wolfsbane sitting on his desk. He was so consumed by the need to confront Pettigrew, to finally bring him to justice, that he ignored the most fundamental rule of his own existence. When he reached the shack, he worked with Sirius to hold Pettigrew at wand point. For a few precious minutes, the truth was almost within reach. Harry, Ron, and Hermione listened as Sirius explained the real story. How he had been the secret keeper, until the last moment, how he had swapped to Pettigrew to throw Voldemort off the scent, and how Pettigrew had sold them out. It was the moment of redemption Sirius had been waiting for. Harry's anger toward his godfather began to thaw, but the moon was rising, and Lupin felt the change coming. He saw Pettigrew's terrified face, and he made a second mistake in quick succession. Instead of stunning Pettigrew or binding him securely, instead of calling for Dumbledore, or even just keeping the wand trained on him, Lupin simply watched. He watched the map, watched the names, watched the man who had destroyed his friends' lives. And in that moment of hurried fixation, he let the transformation take him. The wolfsbane was not in his system. His mind slipped away as his body contorted into the wolf. The room erupted into chaos. Sirius, still in his dog form, tackled Lupin to protect the others, but Pettigrew seized the opening. He transformed into a rat and vanished into the darkness, slipping through the cracks in the floorboards, escaping into the night. Sirius lunged after him, but it was too late. The one chance to prove his innocence was gone, swallowed by Lupin's negligence, and the consequences did not end there. Pettigrew fled back to Voldemort, becoming the servant who would restore the Dark Lord to a physical body. Sirius remained a hunted fugitive, forced back into hiding, never getting his name cleared. The Ministry remained convinced he was the traitor, and the truth remained buried. Harry lost the chance to live with the only family he had left, a future where he could grow up loved and safe, snatched away by a single missed dose and a moment of misplaced focus. Lupin's decision to rush after Pettigrew without securing the wolfsbane, and then to hold him without proper restraint, was not born of malice. It was born of emotion, of grief, of a desperate need to fix the past. But in the end, it only deepened the wound. The Marauder's map, that clever piece of magic named for the four friends who created it, became the instrument of their final fracture. Lupin saw the truth. They failed to act on it wisely, and the war tipped further toward darkness. That night should have ended with Sirius walking free and Pettigrew behind bars. Instead, it ended with a werewolf prowling the grounds, a rat scurrying into the shadows, and a godfather once again condemned to a life on the run. And as we will see in the next chapter, even the most carefully planned timeline can unravel when a single decision destabilizes the fabric of time itself. We open with the wolf moon still hanging over the Forbidden Forest, and Remus Lupin, having forgotten his wolfsbane, is now a monster running through the trees. That single oversight, the map in his pocket, Pettigrew's name twinkling back at him, could have ended the war before it truly began. But Lupin's failure to secure a traitor is only one symptom of a deeper disease within the Ministry of Magic, a disease that gives a 13-year-old girl the power to turn back time for the sake of an extra class. Think about that for a moment. The Ministry of Magic, the same body that once passed laws against muggles owning magical artifacts, signed off on a temporal reversal device, an object so dangerous its use is typically restricted to certified adult wizards working on classified Department of Mysteries projects, and handed it to a child. Not just any child, but Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age. Yes, but still a child. And the reason? She wanted to attend more classes. The Time Turner is not a harmless trinket. It is a coiled snake of causality. Each twist of its hourglass rewinds the user's personal timeline by a fixed interval, but the consequences ripple outward like stones dropped into a still pond. Wizards who misuse time travel often return with missing memories, fractured minds, or worse. They accidentally meet themselves, creating paradoxes that can unravel the fabric of reality. And yet, the Ministry, in its infinite bureaucratic wisdom, decided that a 13-year-old girl could handle that responsibility so she could squeeze in arithmancy, ancient runes, and divination in the same day. Hermione accepted the burden without fully understanding the weight. For months, she lived two lives simultaneously. She attended one class, then turned the hourglass and attended another. She ate lunch twice. She slept half as much as she should. Her hair grew lank, her eyes developed dark circles, and her temper shortened to a razor's edge. Her friends noticed. Ron complained she was always disappearing. Harry saw her yawning in corridors where she shouldn't have been, but neither of them knew that Hermione was running on a clock that looped back on itself, trying to hold together a schedule that no human mind should endure. The exhaustion piled up like autumn leaves in a blocked gutter, and one afternoon, in the middle of a particularly grueling day, Hermione almost made a mistake that could have erased her from existence. She was rushing from charms to history of magic, her head pounding, her vision blurry, when she nearly walked straight into the other Hermione, the one who had already been to that class and was now heading back. That would have been a temporal paradox. The shock of meeting yourself can cause a psychic break, a splintering of consciousness that leaves both versions stranded, their timelines tangled like knotted yarn. Or worse, it could have collapsed the loop entirely, erasing her from the fabric of time. She stopped just in time. Her heart hammered so loudly, she was certain the corridor would hear it. She ducked into an alcove, pressed her back against the cold stone, and watched her other self pass by, none the wiser. That moment was a scream in the dark silence of the Ministry's decision. They had no oversight, no backup plan, no way to monitor her. They just handed her the hourglass and said, "Don't be seen, don't change anything. And by the way, don't let your teachers know. This is not a failure of a single person. This is a failure of a system." The same ministry that let Lupin teach without ensuring he took his potion, the same ministry that locked Peter Pettigrew in a school without a proper guard, the same ministry that would later overlook a different man's son breaking out of Azkaban. The pattern is unmistakable. They trust powerful artifacts to the untrained, gamble with temporal physics for academic convenience, and they never, ever look back. But the Ministry's recklessness does not end with a 13-year-old girl nearly folding time on itself. No, the very same culture of blind trust and procedural neglect would soon enable a father to make a choice so terrible it would help bring Voldemort back to power. That father, Barty Crouch Sr., thought he could control the consequences of his own kindness. He was wrong, and the moment he broke his son out of Azkaban, he set in motion a chain of events that no time-turner could ever undo. The previous chapter left us with a 13-year-old girl, carrying the weight of time itself. Hermione Granger, burdened with a time-turner so she could attend every class, came closer than anyone realized to unraveling reality. But while she was tearing through hours to keep up with her schedule, a far more sinister manipulation of time was unfolding in the highest ranks of the Ministry. Barty Crouch Sr. had built his reputation on being the man who hunted dark wizards without mercy. He was the face of justice during the First War, the one who sent countless Death Eaters to Azkaban, including his own son. And yet, when his wife lay dying, something cracked inside him. The same man who had condemned his son to a lifetime in a freezing stone cell suddenly could not bear to watch his wife fade away in grief, so he made a trade. He used his dying wife to smuggle his Death Eater son out of prison. It was a plan so audacious that it almost defies belief. Crouch Sr. used Polyjuice Potion to swap his wife with his son. She entered Azkaban appearing as her son, weak and ill, while the real Barty Crouch Jr. walked out wearing her face, wrapped in an invisibility cloak. She died inside that cell within days, and the Ministry recorded it as the death of Barty Crouch Jr. The deception was perfect. No one questioned it because no one believed a man as rigid as Crouch Sr. could ever bend the rules he had written. But what happened next is where the true stupidity begins. Crouch Sr. did not hand his son over to the authorities. He did not seek rehabilitation or containment. Instead, he brought the young Death Eater home, placed him under a constant imperious curse, and convinced himself this would be enough. He believed he could control a dark wizard with a simple imperious curse in a suburban home, as if magic alone could suppress years of fanaticism, pain and loyalty to the most dangerous wizard alive. It is hard to decide which part of this decision is dumber, First, he trusted a sustained Imperious curse as a permanent solution. The Imperious is not designed for long-term suppression. It requires constant concentration and renewal. Second, he kept his son hidden in his own house, with house elves and ministry officials wandering in and out. Third, he brought Bertha Jorkins into that house. Bertha Jorkins, the gossipy, persistent ministry employee who had a knack for stumbling onto secrets. And when she saw Mrs. Crouch acting strangely, and she noticed the son who was supposed to be dead moving around the garden, Crouch Sr. panicked. He hit her with a powerful memory charm, but it was botched. It left her vulnerable, wandering, and eventually she crossed paths with the wrong person. That wrong person was Voldemort. When Bertha Jorkins was captured, her damaged mind still held fragments of Crouch Jr.'s survival. Voldemort extracted the truth, and he learned that one of his most loyal servants was not dead but imprisoned under his own father's roof. This hubris allows Bertha Jorkins to discover the secret, leading Voldemort directly to his most loyal servant, and that single event reshapes the entire war. If Crouch Sr. had simply let his son rot in Azkaban, Voldemort would have been forced to find other, less capable servants. The Triwizard Tournament would have unfolded differently. Harry Potter might never have been entered into a deadly contest, and the Graveyard Resurrection might have been delayed or avoided entirely, all because a powerful man could not let go of his dying wife's last wish, and then convinced himself that a simple enchantment could contain a fanatic. This is the same kind of overconfidence that leads people to trust fairy tales too literally. The kind of thinking that assumes a magical solution will hold without considering the cracks. And that is exactly where we are heading next, into a story about a student who trusted a mermaid song so literally that almost cost his friends everything. Because when you hear a clue in a magical tournament, you might want to question whether the sirens are really telling you the truth. Barty Crouch Sr. thought he could control a dark wizard with nothing more than a whispered Imperious curse and a household full of secrets. He was wrong. His son slipped that leash just long enough to help Voldemort rise again, and within a year, the Dark Lord was using the Triwizard Tournament as his own personal stage. That tournament produced a decision from Harry Potter that is almost too painful to watch in hindsight, because it feels like the moment his heart completely overruled his head. And that is the story of the Mermaid song Literalism. When Harry's name came out of the Goblet of Fire, he entered a competition designed for wizards far older and more experienced than him. By the time the second task arrived, he had already faced a dragon, so the stakes felt impossibly high. The clue for the second task came in the form of a golden egg that screamed when opened underwater. But when Harry finally figured out the trick, he heard a haunting song from the Merpeople. The song said that his treasure would be taken, that he had 1 hour to retrieve what was lost, and that if he failed, his friends would never be seen again. Harry took the mermaid song literally. He believed with every fibre of his being that Ron, Hermione, and Cho Chang were going to drown if he did not reach them in time. The Merpeople's words were poetic, but to a boy who had already lost his parents, who had watched Cedric Diggory die in a graveyard just months earlier, poetry sounded like a death sentence. So when he plunged into the cold black water of the Great Lake, he was not thinking about points or victory. He was thinking about stopping a tragedy. He swam as fast as he could, his heart pounding against the pressure of the deep. His gillyweed gave him gills and webbed feet, but it could not give him calm judgment. When he finally reached the Merpeople's village, he saw his friends tied to statues, drifting in the murky water. They looked utterly still. He did not pause to check for breathing or watch for bubbles. He acted on pure terror. He cut them loose and started dragging them toward the surface, each one heavier than the last. But here is the part that stings. The Merpeople had made it perfectly clear that only one hostage needed to be retrieved. The task was designed to test resourcefulness, not heroism. Fleur Delacour had already failed to reach her sister because of Grindylows, and Victor Krum had taken only his own hostage, leaving the others behind. Cedric Diggory had even negotiated with the Merpeople to free his hostage without violence. But Harry could not leave anyone behind. He gathered Ron, Hermione, and even Fleur's sister, struggling against the water's weight, his oxygen running thin, his muscles screaming for mercy. By the time he broke the surface, the hour was almost gone. The judges watched him emerge, gasping, half-drowned, with 3 people clinging to him. He had not completed the task as intended. He had wasted precious minutes dragging extra bodies through the lake, risking his own life and the lives of his friends, because he had misread the riddle. The Merpeople had never planned to drown anyone. The hostages were safe. The song was a metaphor, and Harry had treated it like a funeral notice. His score reflected the disaster. He received only 47 points out of a possible 50 from some judges, but several docked him for his inefficient approach. He finished in 2nd place overall, but only because of his earlier dragon performance. Later, when he learned that the Merpeople had actually been trying to keep the hostages comfortable and safe, he felt a wave of embarrassment mixed with something darker. He realized that his instinct to save everyone, regardless of the rules, had nearly cost him the tournament. But that instinct was not just a personal flaw. It was a vulnerability that his enemies had been watching for months. Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, had already seen Harry's need to be the protector in every situation. He had designed the tournament tasks with that knowledge in mind. By the time the 2nd task ended, he knew exactly how Harry would react to a hostage situation. He knew Harry would not stop to think. He would rush in, arms wide, ready to sacrifice himself for people who might not even be in real danger. That is dangerous part of a hero complex. It can be predicted. It can be exploited. And when the final task arrived, with its maze full of enchantments and a port key waiting at the centre, that same instinct pushed Harry straight into Voldemort's trap. But before we get to that graveyard, we have to talk about another man who let his impulses ruin him. A man who gambled with more than just gold, and whose debts nearly destroyed the entire Triwizard tournament before it even began. That is the story coming up next, the story of Bagman's gambling debt. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. The previous chapter ended with Harry splashing through the Black Lake, convinced his friends were about to drown, wasting precious minutes on a literal interpretation of a riddle. That kind of desperate overreaction feels almost innocent compared to what was happening on the surface, in the stands, and in the pockets of one of the tournament's most important officials. Because while Harry misread a song, Ludo Bagman was misreading his entire life. Ludo Bagman had been a famous beater for the Wizarding national team, a man who once seemed to have the world in the palm of his hand, but the years after his playing days had not been kind. He had taken a job at the Ministry, then as a commentator, and finally as head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports. And somewhere along the way, he developed a habit that would undo everything. Gambling, not the occasional friendly wager, but a compulsion that gnawed at him until he could no longer resist the next bet. By the time the Triwizard tournament rolled around, Bagman was in deep trouble, deep enough that he made the single worst decision of his entire career. Ludo Bagman bets his entire fortune with goblins on a tournament he is supposed to be officiating. Think about that for a moment. He was not just a spectator, he was one of the judges. He was the person responsible for ensuring the tasks were fair, that the rules were followed, that no contestant had an unfair advantage. And yet, with a terrifying lack of self-awareness, he walked into a goblin betting operation and put everything he owned on the outcome of the contest, not on a specific champion, but on the tournament itself, hoping that the chaos would somehow yield a profit. The goblins, shrewd as ever, accepted his wager. They knew desperation when they saw it, and they knew they would eventually collect, one way or another. As the tournament progressed, Bagman's desperation only grew. He had bet on Harry to win, believing the boy's reputation and luck would carry him through. But when the tasks proved more dangerous than anticipated, and when Harry's performance faltered, Bagman's financial collapse seemed inevitable. And that is when he crossed a line that no tournament official should ever approach. His desperation leads him to try and cheat for Harry, creating a conflict of interest that compromises the school. He approached Harry privately, offering cryptic advice, hints, and even an attempt to give him a clue for the first task. But Harry, suspicious of all adults and unsure of Bagman's motives, refused to help. Bagman, not easily discouraged, then tried to influence the judging, to nudge scores in Harry's favour. He became a puppet master, pulling strings that were never his to pull, all because he had staked his entire future on a teenager's success. The result was a web of corruption that stained the entire tournament. The other champions sensed something was off. The other judges, particularly Crouch, with his rigid adherence to rules, grew increasingly frustrated, and the goblins, watching from the shadows, noted every move. They understood exactly what Bagman was doing. They just waited. When the tournament ended, and when Harry emerged victorious from the maze, clutching the Triwizard Cup, Bagman must have felt a surge of relief. He had won his bet. His fortune was safe. But the goblins had already seen the truth. They knew Bagman had cheated, not by winning the bet, but by trying to manipulate the outcome in the goblin code of honor that made the wager void. They demanded their money back with interest. Bagman, having spent most of the winnings already, could not pay, and so he did the only thing a desperate, broken man could do. He ran. His eventual flight from his debts leaves the Weasley twins penniless and the goblins hostile. The Weasley twins, Fred and George, had foolishly placed their own bet with Bagman, trusting his promise of a guaranteed return. They had handed over their entire life savings, and when Bagman vanished into the night, so did their money. The twins were left with nothing but a bitter lesson about misplaced trust. The goblins, furious at being cheated by a man who had once held a position of authority, became even more hostile toward the wizarding world. Their resentment simmered, feeding a distrust that would later boil over during the war. Bagman's gambling debt was not just a personal failure. It was a crack in the foundation of the tournament, a stain on the integrity of the ministry, and a cruel blow to two young men who only wanted to chase their dreams. And it all started because a former sports star could not resist one more roll of the dice. Now, as the winners celebrated and the losers licked their wounds, a new threat was already forming. The Triwizard Cup itself, the very object Harry had grabbed, was not what it seemed. It was a portkey, a trap, a doorway to something far worse than a gambling debt. And Harry was about to find out exactly what lay on the other side. Ludo Bagman's gambling debt had already poisoned the integrity of the Triwizard tournament. But the final task would turn that corruption into a funeral. The maze was the last obstacle, a shifting tower of hedges that rewarded nerve over cleverness. Harry and Cedric Diggory had fought through it together, breaking the tournament's single winner rule with a kind of unspoken honour. They both reached the Triwizard Cup at the same moment, their hands hovering over the twisted golden stem. And that's when Harry made the decision that would haunt him forever. He looked at Cedric, at the boy who had been his rival, his classmate, and by now something like a friend. The cup was the victory, the prize, the glory that every Hogwarts student dreamed of. But Harry knew what it felt like to be the champion everyone. And he also knew that Cedric had earned this moment just as much as he had. So Harry insisted that Cedric take it with him, that they win together. Even though a tie meant sharing the trophy, it was a noble gesture, the kind of selflessness that defines a Gryffindor and confuses a Slytherin. But in this story, nobility rarely goes unpunished. The moment their fingers touched the cup, the world twisted, the maze vanished, the cheers of the crowd fell silent, and Harry and Cedric were hurled through a crushing darkness that smelled of damp earth and something worse. They landed hard on cold grass, the cup clattering away from them, and Harry knew instantly that something was horribly wrong. They were not in the winner's circle. They were in a graveyard, the headstones jagged as broken teeth, and at the centre of that deathly space stood a figure in a hood, cradling a bundle that squirmed like a living thing. This noble gesture had turned a school competition into a funeral. The cup was a portkey, and Harry had carried Cedric straight into Voldemort's trap. The boy who refused to take the win for himself had instead delivered a witness to the Dark Lord's rebirth. Voldemort rose from the cauldron, his body terrible and new, and then he demanded one thing: kill the spare. Cedric Diggory died in the grass, his eyes wide open, his wand still in his hand, and Harry screamed his name into the night as the Death Eaters circled. Harry's refusal to take the championship alone had inadvertently led to Cedric's murder. The trophy that was supposed to mark the end of a game had become the instrument of a death. When Harry returned to Hogwarts, clutching Cedric's body, the tournament's victor was a boy who had lost everything. The cup sat untouched on the ground, glittering with false promise. The Ministry would soon deny the truth, refuse to believe that Voldemort had returned, and that denial would become the engine of the next year's disasters. That's the story of Fudge's year of denial, a stretch of time when the wizarding world chose comfort over courage, and it nearly cost them everything. But for now, the graveyard wanted an answer, and Harry had no choice but to run. He had learned that sometimes the best intentions carve the deepest graves. The silence that followed Harry's return from the graveyard was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a scream stuck in the throat. The Triwizard Cup had been a portkey, and Harry had watched Cedric Diggory die just inches from his own outstretched hand. He had seen Voldemort rise again, flesh and bone and terrible purpose, and he had escaped barely, with Cedric's body clutched against his chest. That moment should have been a siren call. Instead, it became the beginning of a year of deliberate blindness. Cornelius Fudge arrived at Hogwarts before the body had even been laid in the hospital wing. He stood in the moonlit grass, looked at the dark mark floating green and toxic over the stadium, and chose to unsee it. He looked at Harry, trembling, covered in dirt and blood, and chose to hear a liar. Because if Harry was telling the truth, then Fudge had spent the last 13 years telling himself a comforting story, that Voldemort was gone, that the Ministry was in control, that the worst was behind them. To admit otherwise would be to admit that he had been wrong, that he had failed to prepare, that the monster he claimed to have vanquished had simply been waiting. So Fudge made a decision that would echo through every decision that followed. He chose to smear Harry and Dumbledore rather than admit Voldemort had returned. The Daily Prophet became a weapon. Articles painted Harry as a disturbed attention seeker, Dumbledore as a scheming old man who wanted to destabilise the government. Fudge stood at the Ministry podium and assured the wizarding world that the boy who lived was simply confused, traumatised, maybe even dangerous. He refused to listen to the one person who had actually seen the Dark Lord rise. And while Fudge focused on managing the narrative, he let the Ministry become a sieve. He appointed Dolores Umbridge as Hogwarts High Inquisitor, a woman whose loyalty was to the minister's comfort, not to the student's safety. Umbridge's educational decree after educational decree stripped away Dumbledore's authority, practical defence against the dark arts with theoretical coursework, because the last thing the Ministry wanted was a generation of wizards who could actually fight. Meanwhile, Death Eaters quietly slid into vacant positions within the Ministry itself. A whispered word here, a forged reference there. No one checked too closely, because everyone was busy looking at the boy who claimed to have seen a ghost. This year of inaction gave the Dark Lord the time he needed to rebuild his army in secret. While the Ministry obsessed over curriculum reform and character assassination, Voldemort gathered his followers, secured allies among the giants, and sent his most trusted agents to lay traps that would snap shut a year later. Fudge's denial was not just a political mistake, it was a gift. A year of peace that should have been a year of preparation became a year of rot, and the Ministry never caught up. Harry sat in the Gryffindor common room that autumn, watching the fire burn low, knowing that the truth was being buried under ink and bureaucracy. He had no one to confide in except Dumbledore, and even Dumbledore seemed distant, careful, as if he were holding something back. There was a growing pressure inside Harry's skull, a hot ache behind his scar. And he did not yet understand that his mind was becoming a battlefield. The next step in this chain of disasters would not be about the Ministry's lies. It would be about what happens when you have the knowledge to protect yourself, but you refuse to open the door. After Cornelius Fudge chose to bury his head in the sand, the Ministry of Magic became a fortress of denial. But inside Hogwarts, the real war was already being fought in silence. Dumbledore knew that the connection between Harry and Voldemort was a double-edged sword, a window that could be closed only through the ancient art of occlumency, and so he turned to the one person who could teach it, the one person Harry trusted least, Severus Snape. The lessons began in a dim, cluttered office, the air thick with the smell of pickled potion ingredients. Snape, seated across from Harry, would lock eyes with him and whisper the incantation, Legilimens. In that instant, Harry's mind became a battlefield, and Snape would march through the trenches of his worst memories, prying open moments of humiliation, fear, and loss. It was supposed to feel like a shield, but for Harry, it felt like a violation, a psychic assault from a man he had despised since his very first potions class. And so Harry refused to apply himself, not because he was lazy, and not because he didn't understand the stakes. He refused because every lesson was a reminder of Snape's sneers, his cruelty, his favoritism towards Slytherins. Harry let his hatred for the teacher override his common sense. He would deliberately empty his mind, then flood it with petty anger as soon as Snape's gaze met his. He would fight the intrusion with sheer stubbornness, but never with the disciplined blankness Occlumency demanded. In a way, he was fighting the wrong enemy. He was so focused on scoring points against Snape that he forgot the real threat was the Dark Lord already inside his skull. And here is where the decision turns truly dangerous. Instead of closing the window, Harry chose to keep it open. He found the connection to Voldemort fascinating, almost addictive. When Voldemort was angry, Harry's scar burned, and a wave of raw emotion would wash through him. He could sense the Dark Lord's movements, his victories, his glimpses of a snake's eyes, and even his hunger. It made Harry feel special, as though he alone had access to the enemy's mind. He didn't want to shut off that pipeline of information. He wanted to use it to spy on Voldemort and know his plans. But that is not how occlumency works. You cannot keep a window open for observation and expect to control what steps through. Voldemort was no fool. He sensed the open channel, and he began to feed false images into Harry's mind. A vision of Sirius being tortured in the Department of Mysteries. A vision so vivid, so detailed, that Harry never questioned its truth. He had become addicted to the connection, and now the addiction was being exploited. This mental vulnerability was the trap that cost Sirius Black his life. Harry rushed to the Ministry, convinced he was saving his godfather, only to walk straight into a circle of Death Eaters and a false prophecy. The battle that followed ended in the Vale of Death, the loss of the one family Harry had left, all because he could not set aside his hatred for a teacher long enough to learn the one skill that might have saved him. The window was left open, not from ignorance but from choice, and Voldemort, the master of manipulation, saw exactly how to turn that fascination into a fatal error. The Department of Mysteries disaster shook the wizarding world, but it also revealed something deeper about Hogwarts that year. The school was being run by people who valued control over trust, and the most egregious example of that misplaced authority came not from a potions master, but from a pink-clad toad with a quill and a stack of educational decrees. Her name was Dolores Umbridge, and her Inquisitorial squad was about to turn the corridors of Hogwarts into a surveillance state. Harry had left the window open. That was the problem with Occlumency, or rather, with Harry's refusal to learn it. He had wanted to see into Voldemort's mind, to feel the thrill of that connection, to understand what the Dark Lord was planning. But a two-way mirror reflects both ways, and while Harry was peering in, Voldemort was peering out. The vision of the Department of Mysteries, of Sirius being tortured, was a planted image, a carefully crafted lure, and Harry, with his mind unguarded, took the bait completely. That was the tragedy of the 5th year. Not that Voldemort had returned, but that he had found an ally inside Harry's own head. But while Harry was wrestling with visions and a prophecy he didn't fully understand, something else was taking root at Hogwarts, something far more mundane and far more insidious. Dolores Umbridge had arrived at the castle with a quill, a clipboard, and a smile that never reached her eyes. She was not a Death Eater. She was not a dark wizard. She was a bureaucrat, a true believer in the Ministry's right to control every aspect of magical life. And she had been given a mandate by Cornelius Fudge to stop Dumbledore, to discredit Harry, and to bring the school to heel. In that mandate, she found a problem. There were only so many hours in a day, and only so many teachers willing to enforce her decrees. The staff Snape accepted were hostile or openly subversive. The prefects and the head boy and girl were loyal to Dumbledore. How could she police an entire castle of rebellious teenagers with only her own 2 hands and a quill that carved punishments into skin? The answer was simple, and it was one of the dumbest strategic decisions of the entire war. She gave power to the worst possible students. Dolores Umbridge announced the formation of the Inquisitorial squad. It was supposed to be an elite group of students who would help her enforce the new educational decrees. They would have the authority to deduct points, to issue detentions, to patrol corridors, and in theory, it might have worked if she had chosen students with integrity, maturity, or a sense of fairness. She chose none of those. She chose Draco Malfoy, Draco, who had been raised on a diet of pure blood supremacy and family resentment. Draco, who had spent 4 years nursing grudges against Harry, against Hermione, against Ron, against anyone who had ever crossed him. Draco, who was desperate to prove himself to his father and to the Death Eaters he knew were gathering in the shadows. Dolores Umbridge handed him a badge and told him he could do whatever he wanted. What followed was a toxic police state, small scale but terrifying. The Inquisitorial squad was a gang with official sanction. They roamed the hallways in packs, deducting points for the flimsiest reasons. They barged into common rooms, interrogated students, confiscated belongings. They were not enforcing rules. They were settling scores. Draco Malfoy strutted around with the authority of a junior executioner, and his cronies, Crabbe, Goyle, Pansy Parkinson, reveled in the power they had never been allowed to hold before. Hogwarts, which had always been a sanctuary of learning and mischief, became a place of fear, and the worst part, Umbridge encouraged it. She smiled at their reports, praised their diligence, and gave them more authority. She did not care that they were biased, cruel, and corrupt. She cared only that they were loyal to her. In that, she was following a pattern that has doomed authoritarian regimes throughout history. She elevated enforcers who had no stake in justice, only in their own advancement. The result was chaos. Students stopped trusting each other. The house system, already fraught with rivalry, turned into open warfare. Slytherin became the party of the occupiers, and everyone else became the occupied. But Umbridge's greatest mistake was not simply handing power to Draco Malfoy. It was the methods she used to maintain that power. She relied on 2 things: physical torture and veritaserum. The torture came in the form of that black quill. A quill that wrote with the blood of the student whose hand it held. Harry was not the only one who bore those scars. Every detention with Umbridge was a session of slow, cutting punishment. She forced students to write lines, and every line carved itself into their skin. It was not just cruel, it was illegal, even by the Ministry's own lax standards. Blood quills were a banned object, but Umbridge did not care. She was above the law she claimed to enforce. The Veritaserum was even more dangerous. She kept a supply of that truth-inducing potion in her office, ready to use on anyone she suspected of opposing her. She used it on students, on staff, on anyone she could corner. She tried to use it on Harry. But the problem with Veritaserum is that it requires time, preparation, and skill to administer correctly. It can be resisted by someone with strong occlumency, and it can be neutralized by antidotes. Umbridge was not a master of potions. Snape was, and Snape had given her a fake. But even if she had possessed the real thing, the sheer act of using it on children turned the entire school against her. Because here is the thing about a police state. It can only function if the people believe the enforcers have the moral high ground. Once that belief shatters, every detention becomes an act of resistance. Umbridge's reliance on torture and Veritaserum did not make her feared. It made her hated, and hatred, in a school full of witches and wizards, eventually turns into rebellion. That rebellion took many forms. Fred and George Weasley turned a corridor into a swamp. Students started setting off fireworks in her office. The Room of Requirement became the headquarters for a secret army, Dumbledore's army, where Harry actually taught defensive magic. The more Umbridge clamped down, the more inventive the defiance became. She created a resistance simply by existing, and her arrogance made it worse. She believed she was untouchable. She believed the Ministry backed her completely. She believed that no one would dare cross her. That arrogance led her straight into the Forbidden Forest. It happened after Harry had a vision, a false one, of Sirius being tortured. He knew he had to go to the Ministry to save his godfather, but Umbridge caught him, along with Hermione and Ron, and she was determined to extract the truth. She threatened them with the Cruciatus Curse, a spell that had earned her a lifetime in Azkaban. She had resorted to the worst kind of dark magic, and then Hermione, brilliant Hermione, realised that Umbridge wanted information at any cost. She offered a trade, a story about a secret weapon, a weapon hidden in the forest, a weapon that Dumbledore had left behind. It was a lie, a desperate gamble, but Umbridge's ego took the bait. She followed them into the Forbidden Forest at night, accompanied by a small group of Inquisitorial squad members, including Draco. She believed she was in control. She believed she was walking toward ultimate victory. She believed she was the most powerful person in the forest. She forgot that the forest was full of things that did not answer to the Ministry. It was full of centaurs, creatures she had dismissed as half-breeds, as mere animals, as beings unworthy of her consideration. She insulted them to their faces. She called them filthy, subhuman, inferior, and she was shocked when they did not bow to her authority. The centaurs did not care about her title. They did not care about her badge. They saw only a petty, cruel woman who had trespassed into their domain and dared to call them less than human. They took her. They dragged her away into the darkness of the forest, screaming, helpless. For all her power, for all her control over the school, she had been undone by a simple flaw. She could not see the worth in anyone who was not like her, and that blindness led her straight into the arms of creatures she had dismissed as beneath her. Umbridge survived, of course. She was rescued by Dumbledore, who had returned to the school, but her reputation was shattered. The Inquisitorial squad was disbanded. Her authority crumbled, and yet she still remained a broken but dangerous presence in the castle, because the Ministry still supported her, and Fudge still refused to believe the truth. By the time the year reached its climax, Harry had fallen for the trap in the Department of Mysteries. That rushing, that refusal to think, that blind faith in a vision, it cost him everything. Sirius fell through the veil, and Harry lost the only family he had left. The window he had kept open had let in a hurricane, and all because he had refused to learn Occlumency. All because he had trusted a vision instead of his friends. All because he had let his emotions override his reason. But before we get to that moment, before the veil and the prophecy and the battle, there is one more decision we have to examine, because Harry's rush into the Department of Mysteries was not just an impulse. It was the culmination of a long chain of bad choices, each one feeding the next. And the one right before the fall is the moment when Harry decided that he did not need to verify anything. He had seen Sirius in his mind. He knew it was real, and so he set off to save him. But what if he had paused? What if he had checked with Creature, or sent a Patronus, or simply waited for the vision to clarify? The next chapter is about exactly that rush, and about the moment when Harry Potter, the boy who lived, made the decision that would leave him with nothing but a handful of broken memories and a shattered prophecy. Umbridge had turned Hogwarts into a fortress of suspicion, quills that carved punishment into skin, detention that lasted until dawn, and an army of prefects loyal only to her, students like Draco Malfoy given the authority to drag anyone they pleased to her office. It was a school built on fear, and Harry Potter was drowning in it. He could not sleep. He could not focus. Every dream, every vision from the connection he shared with Voldemort felt more urgent, more vivid, more real. And then, on a night thick with dread, it came. A vision so clear it might as well have been a window. He saw Sirius, bound and screaming, in the bowels of the Department of Mysteries. His godfather was being tortured, and Harry felt every ounce of that pain, as if it were his own. Hermione tried to reason with him. She pointed out the facts. The Ministry was heavily guarded. Umbridge had control of the Flu network, and Voldemort had already used Harry's mind against him before. But logic was no match for the desperation in Harry's chest. He could not wait. He could not verify. He grabbed Ron and Hermione and demanded they fly to London on Thustral back, a plan that had about as much structure as a child's game of make-believe. He did not stop to ask why Sirius would be at the Ministry, of all places, or why Voldemort would choose such an indirect method when he could simply attack the house. The thought never crossed his mind. And then there was the mirror. Sirius had given it to him, wrapped in a clumsy package at Christmas. A two-way mirror so they could talk whenever they wanted. Harry had left it buried in his trunk, forgotten, unused. One look into that mirror would have shown him Sirius at home, safe, alive, complaining about Creature's cooking. One fraction of a second's pause, one moment of doubt, would have dissolved the whole catastrophe. But Harry did not pause. He did not use the tool that had been handed to him. He rushed forward with his heart pounding and his wand drawn, following a vision that was never meant to be trusted. The journey to the Ministry was a blur of enchanted doors, empty corridors, and the clatter of boots on stone. The Department of Mysteries swallowed them whole. Hallways twisted into circles. Doors opened onto rooms filled with floating planets, time turners, and brains swimming in green fluid. There was no tortured godfather. There was only a trap, carefully laid, patiently waiting. And when the Death Eaters stepped out of the shadows, Harry finally understood the cost of ignoring the people who loved him enough to warn him. The battle that followed was not a rescue. It was a funeral dressed up as a fight. Sirius arrived. Yes, because he had sensed Harry's danger through the same dark link that had deceived him. But by the time he came, chaos was already in control. Curses flew. The veil, an ancient archway covered in tattered black curtains, stood in the center of the room, humming with a power no one could explain. And in the final, frantic seconds, as Sirius laughed at Bellatrix Lestrange's blundering spell, he stepped backward, and the veil took him. One moment he was there, the next he was gone, swallowed into a silence that could never be broken. Harry had sprinted across the Ministry to save the person he loved most. And because he had refused to listen, because he had refused to check a simple mirror, he had delivered that person straight into the hands of death. It was a lesson written in grief, and it would echo through everything that followed. Some mistakes are made in a flash, and some are made slowly, over weeks of stubbornness and pride. The choice to ignore the mirror was not a single moment. It was a string of days where Harry told himself he did not need it, that he would talk to Sirius later, that there was always time. But time is a resource that runs out faster than anyone expects. And when you touch a cursed object, When you reach for something that wants to destroy you, time can dissolve into a single heartbeat that lasts just long enough to feel the regret. The wisest wizard of the age, Albus Dumbledore, made a single mistake that cost him everything. And the tragedy is, he knew exactly what he was doing. After Harry's disastrous rush to the Department of Mysteries, after Sirius fell through the veil, Dumbledore was left carrying a burden that had already been too heavy for a century. You see, the ring he found in the ruins of the Gaunt Shack, the one with the black stone set in gold, was no ordinary heirloom. It was the Resurrection Stone, one of the 3 Deathly Hallows, but it was also a Horcrux. Dumbledore had spent months hunting down Voldemort's soul fragments. He knew that any Horcrux could be booby-trapped with the most vicious magic. He knew that touching it risked a curse so potent it could kill in seconds. And yet, when he held the ring in his palm, he did not summon Harry, did not summon Snape, did not even try to destroy it with Gryffindor's sword. Instead, he slipped it onto his finger. Why would the most brilliant wizard of the age commit such a reckless act? It was not arrogance. It was not a lapse in judgment born of old age. It was grief. Raw, unhealed, 60-year-old grief over his sister Ariana. The Resurrection Stone, you see, was said to bring back the dead. Not truly, only shadows, echoes of those who had passed. But Dumbledore, for all his wisdom, had never made peace with the night his sister died, in a 3-way duel between himself, his brother Aberforth, and Grindelwald. He had spent decades building a legacy of power and control, but beneath the calm exterior, the guilt was a splinter that had never been removed. When he saw the stone, he thought not of Horcruxes, not of the war, not of Harry. He thought of Ariana. He thought of saying he was sorry. He thought of holding her hand one more time. So he put it on. The curse struck instantly. It was not a slow poison or a creeping decay. It was a searing, withering fire that crawled up his arm, blackening his flesh and eating away at his hand. Dumbledore barely managed to pull the ring off. He destroyed the Horcrux with Gryffindor's sword, but the damage was done. The curse was irreversible. Severus Snape, the greatest potioneer of the age, could only contain it, could only slow its spread. Dumbledore was given at most 1 year to live, and that is where the second terrible decision began. Because Dumbledore, knowing he was dying, did not choose to spend his final months training Harry or revealing the full truth about Horcruxes. Instead, he chose to orchestrate his own death. He saw the chain of events unfolding. Draco Malfoy, tasked by Voldemort to kill him, failing repeatedly. Snape bound by an unbreakable vow, the Elder Wand's allegiance shifting. Dumbledore decided that his death must be planned, that it must be Snape who struck the blow, to protect Draco's soul and to ensure the Elder Wand's power would die with him. But that plan meant keeping Harry in the dark. It meant letting the boy believe he had to kill his mentor, only to reveal the truth after it was too late. It meant that Harry would lose his guide, his protector, his only hope of understanding the war he was about to fight. A full year before he was ready, the mistake of touching the ring set in motion a cascade of secrecy, manipulation, and premature loss. Dumbledore's grief, his one moment of weakness, robbed Harry of the one person who could have truly prepared him for what lay ahead. And while Dumbledore's intentions were noble, the result was that Harry entered the Horcrux hunt blind, carrying the burden of a dead man's plan without the full map. That plan, of course, would also lead to another moment where a well-intentioned but reckless decision would scar a student and shape the final confrontation. But that is a story for the next chapter. When a young wizard reaches for a potions book and finds a spell he never should have spoken aloud, Dumbledore's hand withered, the curse spreading black and slow, and yet he continued to move pieces across the board, sacrificing himself for a plan only he fully understood. But while the headmaster made his fatal choice in solitude, another decision was brewing in the corridors of Hogwarts, one that would spill blood across the stone floor of a bathroom and shatter the last shred of illusion Harry Potter had about the glamour of dark magic. It started as so many reckless moments do, with anger. Harry had been tailing Draco Malfoy for weeks, convinced the Slytherin was up to something that involved the Room of Requirement, a vanishing cabinet, and Death Eaters waiting for a signal. He was right, but that did not justify what happened next. When Harry caught Malfoy weeping in a bathroom, vulnerable and alone, the moment called for strategy, for restraint, for the cool-headedness of a boy who had survived 4 assassination attempts. Instead, Harry let his temper boil over. Malfoy cursed first, a sickly purple jet of something lethal, and Harry reacted without thinking, without even knowing what the words meant. He reached for the Half-Blood Prince's textbook, flipped to a dog-eared page, and shouted the incantation that would change everything. Sectumsempra. The sound was wet, slicing through air and skin and bone. Harry did not know what the spell did. He had never tested it, never read the annotation carefully enough to understand its purpose. All he knew was that the prince had written for enemies next to it, and in that moment, that was enough. The jet of light hit Draco Malfoy across the chest and face, and the boy crumpled, his robes drenched in a fountain of crimson. The walls and floor became a lake of blood, and Harry stood frozen, watching a classmate he despised slip toward death because he had trusted a stranger's notes more than his own judgment. This was not the first time Harry had used an untested spell, but it was the first time the consequences were so immediate, so visceral, so permanent. He nearly killed a classmate in a bathroom, proving that he was becoming as reckless as the prince he admired. The prince had written the spell with a casualness that suggested mastery, a quick scribble in the margin, no warning, no explanation. Harry had read it as permission, as a mark of cool, as the kind of advanced combat magic that made the prince seem invincible. But magic does not care about admiration. It only cares about intent and execution, and Harry's intent was rage, not justice. That night in the hospital wing, as Madame Pomfrey fought to close wounds that would scar Draco Malfoy for life, Harry's innocence about the nature of dark magic evaporated. The prince was no longer a hero to emulate. He was a stranger who had left a weapon lying on a bathroom floor. Harry had picked it up, swung it blindly, and nearly ended a life. The coolness of the curse vanished, replaced by the cold reality of what it meant to wield power without understanding. He had crossed a line he never meant to cross, and the proof was etched in the pale, frightened face of his enemy. And yet, as the blood dried and the accusations mounted, the undercurrents of that decision continued to ripple outward. Draco Malfoy did not die, but his mission did not end either. The vanishing cabinet remained, the Death Eaters awaited their signal, and soon, a different kind of vow would be made in a quiet room, binding 2 men to a promise that could only end in tragedy. The Unbreakable Vow was waiting. Harry nearly killed Draco Malfoy with a curse he didn't understand. That moment in that cold Hogwarts bathroom was the first crack in a much larger, darker plan. It was a warning that the careful line between allies and enemies was fraying, and that the pressure on Draco was already unbearable. But the person who understood that best wasn't Dumbledore, or Snape, or even Lucius Malfoy. It was Narcissa. Narcissa Malfoy had watched her son collapse under the weight of a task she never wanted for him. Voldemort had given Draco an impossible mission: kill Albus Dumbledore. Failure meant death for Draco and for his family. And Narcissa, a woman who had spent her life upholding the cold, brittle dignity of pure-blood society, was now reduced to a desperate mother willing to tear apart every rule, every alliance, every oath to save her child. This is where the truly catastrophic decision begins. In the summer before Harry's 6th year, Narcissa slipped away from Malfoy Manor. She went to Spinner's End, the dilapidated home of Severus Snape, and she brought her sister Bellatrix with her. Bellatrix Lestrange, the most fanatical of Voldemort's followers, the woman who had tortured Alice and Frank Longbottom into insanity, the woman who would cheerfully kill her own family for the Dark Lord's approval. That Bellatrix. And yet even Bellatrix could not fully grasp what Narcissa was about to do. Narcissa Malfoy and Bellatrix Lestrange forced Snape into a magical contract that guarantees his death if Draco fails. This is not a casual request. This is the Unbreakable Vow, one of the most binding and dangerous magical agreements known to wizardkind. Break it and you die instantly. The caster bonds their own life force to the promise, and if the task is not completed, the Oathbreaker drops dead on the spot. There is no escape, no loophole, no second chance. Snape, the master of mental shields, the double agent who had fooled Voldemort himself, found himself cornered. He could not refuse Narcissa without revealing his true loyalties, or at least without destroying her trust in him, which would ripple back to Voldemort. He could not accept lightly, because that would tie him to a mission he did not fully control. But Narcissa's desperation was absolute. She knelt before him, a woman who had never knelt for anyone, and begged him to swear it. Bellatrix, suspicious and venomous, watched every word, ready to report any hesitation. Snape agreed. He placed his hand over Narcissa's, and Bellatrix's wand glowed with the binding magic. The vow was made. Snape swore to protect Draco, to help him complete the task, and if Draco faltered, to finish the mission himself. That last clause is the dagger, because if Draco failed, Snape would have to kill Dumbledore, and if Snape did not, he would die. This move limits Snape's tactical flexibility and forces the premature assassination of Dumbledore. Up until that moment, Snape had been playing a long game. He was Dumbledore's spy, feeding information to the Order, while maintaining cover with the Death Eaters. He had time. He had options. He could wait for the right moment, the right circumstance, the right strategy. But now, the clock was ticking. Draco was spiraling, and Voldemort wanted results. Snape could no longer afford to be patient. He had to move on his own timeline, not Dumbledore's, and Dumbledore knew it. When Snape returned to Hogwarts and told the headmaster about the vow, Dumbledore did not flinch. He saw the trap closing. He understood that Narcissa's maternal panic had forced a chain reaction that would end with his death. And soon, there is a tragic poetry here. Dumbledore, the great strategist, the man who had orchestrated his own long-term plans for decades, was now being pushed into a finale he could not delay. The Order of the Phoenix had been built around secrecy, patience, and the slow rebuilding of trust. But Narcissa's fear shattered that patience. It places the entire Order of the Phoenix's strategy on a knife's edge based on a mother's panic. Think about that. The fate of the war, the lives of every Order member, the survival of Harry Potter himself, all of it suddenly rested on one woman's desperate gamble to save her son. Narcissa was not thinking about the Order. She was not thinking about the prophecy, or the Horcruxes, or the ultimate victory over Voldemort. She was thinking about Draco, and because she acted on that panic, Snape's hands were tied. He had to accelerate the assassination, which meant Dumbledore would die earlier than planned, which meant Harry would be thrust into the Horcrux hunt with less preparation, which meant the entire structure of Dumbledore's posthumous strategy would be rushed and uncertain. It was a dumb decision in the sense that it was born of pure emotion, blind love, and a refusal to trust a slower, more calculated approach. But it was also completely understandable. Narcissa was a mother, and mothers, even dark ones, will burn the world to save their children. That does not make the decision wise. It makes it tragic and monumentally consequential. Snape walked away from Spinner's End with a vow that would define the next year of his life. He could no longer afford to be the patient double agent. He had to become the man who would kill his own master, and Dumbledore, who had already touched the cursed Horcrux ring and was dying anyway, accepted that fate. He told Snape in the end that it had to be done, but the timing was no longer Dumbledore's. It was Narcissa's. This was the moment when the war turned from a careful game of chess into a frantic scramble. Every decision from here on would be made under the shadow of that vow, of a mother's desperate plea and a spy's unwilling promise. And soon, another careless mistake would echo even louder, one that would strip away the last shred of anonymity and put Harry, Ron, and Hermione directly in the path of Voldemort's hunters. A single slip of a name, a single word spoken too loudly in the wrong place. That is what comes next. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. Narcissa Malfoy had just bound Severus Snape to an unbreakable vow, a contract that would kill him if Draco failed. That moment of desperation, of a mother's love twisted into a trap, set the stage for Dumbledore's fall. But even as that dark magic sealed itself, another thread of the war was already tightening elsewhere. In the cold, wet woods of the countryside, Harry Potter, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger were hunched inside a small tent, trying to stay alive. They had been on the run for weeks, moving constantly, never staying in one place long enough for the Snatchers to find them. They had grown thin, irritable and deeply, bone-etchingly tired, and they had done everything right. They had followed every rule of magical concealment. They had layered protective enchantments over their camp, disillusionment charms, muggle-repelling wards, even the powerful Fidelius-like magic that came from Hermione's enchanted bag. They were invisible to the world. But there was one rule Hermione had given them, that they had not yet broken. Do not say Voldemort's name. The Ministry had fallen. The Death Eaters controlled everything now, and the name itself had been turned into a weapon. The Taboo, a magical jinx placed on the Dark Lord's name, would trigger an immediate alarm the moment it was spoken. Any witch or wizard who said it aloud would break any nearby protective enchantments, and within seconds, Snatchers would apparate to the location. Ron and Hermione had drilled this into Harry's head over and over again. It was the most dangerous word in the English language, and yet, under the pressure of endless flight, of hunger and fear and frustration, Harry forgot. It happened on a night much like any other. The trio was arguing about their next move, about how to find the next Horcrux, about whether they should trust the name of Godric Gryffindor that had appeared on the sword. Ron was restless, Hermione was exhausted, and Harry was angry. And in that moment of raw emotion, he spoke the name. The sound of it left his lips before his brain could stop it. He saw Hermione's face go white. He saw Ron freeze. And then he felt it. The protective enchantments around them shatter like glass. The air popped. The ground heaved. And within seconds, a group of Snatchers apparated into the clearing. Wands drawn. They were captured without a fight. Tied, bound and dragged from the forest. The camp, the bag with all their supplies, the carefully maintained illusion of safety. All of it collapsed in the span of a single spoken syllable. That word had undone everything. It had turned their hideout into a beacon, and it had sent them directly to Malfoy Manor, the heart of Death Eater territory. At the Manor, the worst of the war descended. Hermione was tortured for information, forced to scream beneath Bellatrix Lestrange's Cruciatus curse, while Harry and Ron listened helplessly from their prison in the chandelier. The Manor became a cage of terror, a place where hope died slowly, and it was there that Dobby the house elf arrived, summoned by love, only to fall in the end, pierced by Bellatrix's thrown knife. Dobby died in Harry's arms on the beach at Shell Cottage, his last words a whisper of friendship. All of that destruction traced back to a single moment of carelessness. One word, one name. Harry had known better. It was not arrogance that made him say it, but exhaustion. A lapse in judgment that cost them their freedom, Hermione's peace of mind, and Dobby's life. That is the weight of a truly bad decision. It does not need malice to cause harm. It only needs a moment when you stop thinking. And then came the aftermath, the desperate need to rebuild trust. Harry would soon have to confront a creature who valued truth above all else. And he would have to decide whether honesty or strategy would win the day. That lie, the one he would tell to Griphook, would carry its own terrible cost. But that is a story for another chapter. The capture at Malfoy Manor should have been the end. But Harry, Ron and Hermione escape with the help of Dobby, and they apparate to Shell Cottage. And there, on that windswept beach, Harry makes one of the most calculatedly foolish decisions of the entire war, he decides to break into Gringotts. You see, they have no way to destroy the Horcrux they just recovered from Bellatrix Lestrange's vault, Hufflepuff's cup. They need the Sword of Gryffindor, which is now held by Griphook, a goblin they rescued from the manor, and so Harry proposes a trade. The sword in exchange for Griphook's help getting into the Lestranges' vault. But Harry never intends to actually hand the sword over. He knows the sword belongs to Gryffindor, to Hogwarts, to the fight against Voldemort. In his mind, it's a necessary deception, a white lie to secure the Horcrux and win the war. But here's where things go terribly wrong. Harry simply does not understand goblin culture. He has been raised in a world where ownership is defined by human law, by inheritance, by moral right. Goblins have a completely different concept. For them, the maker of an object is its true owner, forever. Goblins do not sell items, they rent them. They consider wizards to be thieves, who steal the treasures goblins have crafted. To a goblin, a promise is a binding contract, and the Sword of Gryffindor was made by goblins. They have wanted it back for centuries. When Harry promises the sword to Griphook, he is not making a tactical bargaining chip. He is making a sacred oath in the goblin's eyes, and Harry understands none of this. He thinks he can make the promise, get the Horcrux, and then renege once they're safe. He underestimates goblin culture and their definition of ownership so completely that he doesn't even consider the consequences. But Griphook sees the lie from the start. He knows Harry values the sword for its history, for its connection to Hogwarts, and goblins despise being tricked. That's the core of this mistake. Harry treats Griphook as a tool rather than an ally with his own code of honor. So they enter Gringotts. The plan works, barely. They ride the cart down into the deepest vaults. They face the dragon. They secure the Horcrux. But the moment they emerge from the vault, Griphook seizes the sword and vanishes, abandoning them in the heart of Gringotts. He leaves them trapped in the high-security vaults, surrounded by alarms and furious goblins, with no way out except a desperate ride on the dragon. Harry's decision to lie to Griphook is not just a moral failure, it is a strategic catastrophe. He trades the trust of an entire species. Goblins who might have turned against Voldemort for a temporary advantage, and in doing so, he nearly gets himself and his friends killed, buried forever in the underground labyrinth of Gringotts. It is a perfect example of how even well-intentioned deception can backfire when you fail to respect the values of those you're dealing with, and yet they escape. They ride the dragon out into the countryside, and the Horcrux is secured. But from this moment on, goblins will be hostile to them. Harry will never recover the Sword of Gryffindor, and the war will have one fewer potential ally, because he promised something he couldn't deliver to someone whose measure of loyalty he refused to take seriously. The next chapter in this series of disastrous choices involves another trust betrayed, but this time, it's a father who sells out his guests to save his daughter. That story is coming up. Harry's lie to Griphook was a gambit that bought them a sword but lost them an ally. The goblins' betrayal at Malfoy Manor was the inevitable result of underestimating a culture that measures trust in steel and blood. And now, with the sword in hand but the path forward crumbling, the trio needs a new lead. They need someone who understands the secrets of the wizarding world. Someone who's always been an eccentric but reliable source. Xenophilius Lovegood. So they set out for the Lovegood home, a strange tottering tower shaped like a rook, perched high on a cliff overlooking the valley. The air smells of roots and rust, and the wind carries a faint chime of odd hanging objects. Luna's father has always been a figure of amused tolerance for the trio, a man who prints articles about crumple-horned snorkax and insists that the Rotfang conspiracy is the real threat to the Ministry. But desperation turns even the most unlikely allies into necessary contacts. Inside the house is a museum of the inexplicable. Stacks have climbed to the ceiling, dusty and creased. The walls are hung with paintings of improbable creatures, and the floor creaks under a patchwork of carpets that seem to have been stitched from slope and moonlit moss. Xenophilius greets them with his usual dazed warmth, but there's something wrong. His eyes dodge theirs. His hands shake as he offers them Gurdy root tea. He's nervous, but not in the way of a man afraid for his daughter. He's nervous like a man who knows a trap is set and is trying not to spring it before the prey enters. Luna is not home. Xenophilius explains that she's gone to catch some rare freshwater plimpies, but the story unravels too quickly. When pressed, he cracks. The Death Eaters have taken her. They visited a week ago, demanding information about Harry's whereabouts. Xenophilius had nothing to give them, so they took his daughter as leverage. And now, in his desperation to get her back, he sees an opportunity. He invites the trio to stay for dinner, a meal of mock something that tastes of nettles and regret. And while Harry, Ron, and Hermione eat, Xenophilius slips to call the Ministry, not to warn them. No, he calls the Ministry to betray them. He summons the Death Eaters, believing that if he hands over Harry, they will release Luna alive. It's a terrible miscalculation. The Death Eaters have no intention of honouring any deal. They don't keep promises. They keep prisoners. But Xenophilius is blinded by a father's love, the kind of love that makes a man believe that the monster holding his child can be reasoned with. He doesn't see that trading one hostage for another doesn't free anyone. It just adds another name to the list of the missing. The trap snaps shut. Harry, Ron, and Hermione realize what's happening only when the hearth begins to glow green and armed Death Eaters step through the flames. Xenophilius stands there, his wand half raised, his face a mask of anguish and hope. He pleads with them to understand that Luna is all he has left. But understanding doesn't stop a killing curse. What follows is a chaos of spellfire in a house that was never built for combat. The trio fights back, but the structure itself becomes a weapon. Stairs collapse, walls buckle, and the eccentric collections, the blibbering humdingers, the dirigible plums, are shattered by hexes. In the end, the tower begins to crumble. The trio barely escapes, apparating away as the house collapses into a pile of rubble and regret. And Xenophilius. He survives, but his home is gone, his daughter still captive, and his trust in the Death Eaters shattered. It's a moment that illustrates a deeper, darker truth about the war. Desperate love doesn't buy you mercy from a regime that feeds on fear, and the people who think they can negotiate with monsters often end up eating themselves. But there is another logic at play in this war. A logic far more twisted than a father's broken bargain. It's the logic of a wand that chooses its master not by blood, but by conquest. A logic that the Dark Lord himself will fail to understand until it costs him everything. And that miscalculation, his belief that the Elder Wand would serve him absolutely, is what sets the stage for his final undoing. Xenophilius Lovegood sat in his ruined home, his daughter taken, his hope shattered, and the Dark Lord's followers gone without a thank you. He had bet everything on a trade that was never meant to be honoured. The Death Eaters did not care about Luna. They cared only about Harry Potter, and once the trap failed, the Lovegoods were left with nothing but ash and regret. That was the cost of trying to bargain with a regime that defined loyalty as absolute, that treated any hesitation as a wound, and yet, for all of Xenophilius's miscalculation, he was only a footnote in a much larger pattern of misunderstanding. A pattern that now led straight to the man who thought he could command magic itself through murder. Voldemort stood on the shore of the lake inside the cave where he had once hidden a Horcrux. He had come there not to retrieve a relic, but to kill his most useful servant. Severus Snape had played his role perfectly for years, feeding intelligence, protecting the boy, even striking down Dumbledore at the appointed hour. But to Voldemort, that final act was not a sacrifice, it was a claim. He believed that by killing the wizard, who had killed the previous master of the Elder Wand, the wand's allegiance would transfer to him. It was the logic of a child who thinks ownership is determined by who holds the weapon last, not by who earns its respect. The wand in question was the Elder Wand, the Death Stick, the most powerful wand ever created. Its history was written in blood. Every master had won it by defeating the previous owner, and every master had died because they believed that simple victory was enough. Voldemort had read the stories, had studied the legends, but he missed the subtle truth that the wand did not care about the body that fell. It cared about the magic that conquered, and that conquest did not have to be a killing curse. It could be a disarming charm cast in a tower by a boy who had never intended to become the master of anything. When Draco Malfoy confronted Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower, he was not trying to win the Elder Wand. He was trying to complete a task he had been given under duress. But magic does not care about intent. The moment Draco disarmed Dumbledore, the moment the headmaster's wand flew from his hand, the Elder Wand's loyalty shifted. It recognized Draco Malfoy as its true master. Nothing that happened afterward could change that, because the wand had already chosen. So when Snape cast the killing curse moments later, he was not defeating Dumbledore in a duel. He was simply executing a man who no longer held power over that wand. The wand did not transfer to Snape. It remained with Draco, unaware and uncaring of the elaborate plan Voldemort had constructed. Voldemort never considered that possibility. He saw the world in hierarchies of strength, invisible acts of dominance. Draco was a boy, a student, a coward. He could not possibly have done anything that mattered. So Voldemort looked at Snape, saw the man who had killed Dumbledore, and decided that the Elder Wand must belong to him. To claim it, he would have to kill Snape, not in a duel, not in a test of skill, but in a cold execution, because he believed that was how the wand was won. He did not ask. He did not investigate. He simply assumed that the wand followed the same rules as the rest of his world. Might makes right. That assumption was about to cost him everything. The night before the Battle of Hogwarts, Voldemort summoned Snape to the Shrieking Shack. He spoke of the wand, of its power, of the need for absolute loyalty. And then, without warning, he had Nagini strike. The snake's venom tore through Snape's throat, and the man who had spent decades living a lie died in a pool of his own blood, watching the Dark Lord walk away believing he had won. But the wand did not change hands. It stayed with Draco Malfoy, who was at that moment inside Hogwarts, terrified and uncertain, holding no idea that he carried the key to Voldemort's undoing. The irony is almost too sharp to hold. Voldemort spent years hunting the Elder Wand, obsessed with its legend, convinced that it would make him invincible. He killed one of his most valuable agents to claim it. He stood over Snape's body and thought he had finally achieved mastery over death itself. And yet the wand remained utterly indifferent to him. It answered to Draco, and Draco had no idea. When the final duel came, the Elder Wand would refuse to harm Harry Potter because Harry had disarmed Draco in the Malfoy Manor just weeks before. The wand's loyalty had moved one final time, from Draco to Harry, and Voldemort never noticed. He cast the killing curse, and the wand that was supposed to guarantee victory simply obeyed a master it no longer recognized. It was the most catastrophic failure of logic in the entire war. A man who prided himself on understanding magic reduced himself to the simplest possible reading of power. He did not ask who had actually disarmed Dumbledore. He did not consider that a wand's allegiance could be won without a death. He saw only what he wanted to see, a clear line from killing to ownership. And he walked that line straight into his own destruction. That moment in the Shrieking Shack, when Nagini struck and Snape fell, was the point of no return. From there, everything Voldemort did was built on a foundation of sand. The wand would never serve him, no matter how many times he tried to use it. And yet, before that final confrontation, there was another hesitation. A moment in the Malfoy Manor drawing room where a single decision could have changed everything. Draco Malfoy, standing in front of the captured trio, had the chance to identify Harry Potter. He had the chance to claim the Dark Lord's favour, to redeem himself in his father's eyes, to end the war in a single word. But he did not speak. He hesitated, and that hesitation would echo all the way to the final battle. Voldemort kills Severus Snape on the night of the Battle of Hogwarts, believing the Elder Wand's allegiance will transfer to him upon the death of its last true master. But he has overlooked a crucial detail. Draco Malfoy disarmed Dumbledore months earlier on the Astronomy Tower, and the wand had already recognised Draco as its owner. When Harry later disarms Draco in the Malfoy Manor cellar, the wand's loyalty shifts again, rendering Voldemort's murder of Snape not only pointless, but actively self-defeating. The Dark Lord's obsession with conquest, and his refusal to consider the subtleties of wand lore, lead him to destroy his most valuable double agent and hand the most powerful wand in existence directly to his enemy. It is a strategic catastrophe born of arrogance, and it sets the stage for the final confrontation. But before that final confrontation, the war reaches its most desperate moment. The trio are dragged into Malfoy Manor, their faces swollen beyond recognition by Hermione's jinx. Bellatrix Lestrange is ecstatic, cackling as she examines the prisoners. Certain they have captured the real Harry Potter, she orders Draco to identify him, to confirm which of these two bloated figures is the boy who lived. And Draco steps forward, wand in hand, the entire outcome of the war hanging on his answer. Draco Malfoy hesitates. He stares at Harry's distorted face, and he knows. This is the moment he has been dreading for years. If he points his wand and says the words, the war ends. Voldemort wins. His family might finally be safe. But something flickers behind his eyes. Fear, yes, but also something deeper, a refusal to be the one who ends it. He cannot bring himself to make that final identification. He stalls, mumbling something unconvincing, letting the seconds stretch until Bellatrix grows impatient and takes over herself. That hesitation changes everything, because while Bellatrix is distracted, Hermione has time to think. She sees Draco's cowardice, and she seizes the window it opens. She lies about the sword of Gryffindor, claiming it is a fake, buying them precious moments. And in that same pocket of indecision, Dobby arrives, summoned by a desperate whisper, and he intervenes with a chandelier and a flash of elvish magic. The prisoners escape. The Golden Trio slips through the Death Eater's fingers because Draco Malfoy could not bring himself to utter a single decisive word. This moment of moral cowardice, this refusal to commit, costs the Dark Lord his most prized captives. Harry, Ron and Hermione are able to regroup, recover the sword, and continue their hunt for Horcruxes. Voldemort's plan collapses not because of a brilliant counterattack, but because a scared teenage boy could not bear to look himself in the mirror afterward. Draco's hesitation is a small crack in the facade of Death Eater loyalty, and through that crack, the whole war begins to break apart. And here is where we must pause, because that same night, another man makes a decision that nearly destroys everything they have fought for. Remus Lupin, believing himself a burden and a danger to his new family, prepares to abandon his pregnant wife, Tonks, and join Harry on the run. That choice, born of self-loathing and misplaced heroism, is the subject of our next chapter. The Malfoy Manor disaster was a study in hesitation. Draco Malfoy stood there, staring at a face he knew, and could not bring himself to say the words. That single moment of cowardice gave Dobby the opening he needed, and the trio escaped into the night, bruised but alive. But the war was far from over, and the cost of that escape would ripple outward in ways none of them expected. Not long after, while Harry, Ron and Hermione were hiding in the wilderness, trying to piece together the fragments of Dumbledore's mission, an unexpected visitor appeared at their camp. It was Remus Lupin, looking haggard and desperate, his robes stained and his eyes wild with something that was not quite fear. He had come to join them. He wanted to abandon everything else and run off with Harry on the Horcrux hunt. On the surface, it sounded noble. Lupin was a skilled wizard, a seasoned fighter, and someone who had known Harry since the beginning. But the truth was far more troubling. He was not there to help, he was there to escape. Because at home, Nymphadora Tonks, his wife, was pregnant with their child, and Remus Lupin was terrified. He had spent his entire life believing he was a monster. The werewolf curse had defined him, shaped him, and convinced him that he did not deserve love or happiness. When Tonks fell in love with him, he resisted. When she married him, he doubted. And when she told him she was carrying his child, he saw only a reflection of his own curse. He looked at that unborn baby and saw a monster before it was even born. He saw a child that would inherit his affliction, that would be shunned and hated just like he was. And instead of standing by his family, he decided to run. So he appeared at Harry's camp, offering his wand and his loyalty, but really offering his cowardice disguised as sacrifice. He told Harry he would be more useful out here, that Tonks and the baby would be better off without him, that he would only bring them pain. It was one of the most selfish things a person could do. Abandon a pregnant wife in a time of war because you are afraid of your own shadow. Harry saw through it instantly. The boy who had lost his own parents, who had grown up knowing what it meant to be abandoned, did not hold back. He told Lupin that he was being a coward. He said that Tonks had been through enough, that she needed him, and that running away was not bravery. It was the harshest rebuke Harry had ever delivered to someone he loved. And it was the only thing that got through to Lupin. The werewolf broke down. He left the camp without another word and returned to Tonks. He went back to face his fears, to be a father, to be a husband, to prove that he was more than the curse that had haunted him his entire life. It was a moment of redemption, but only because Harry refused to let him take the easy way out. That decision to abandon his family was one of the dumbest, most heartbreaking choices in the entire series. It was rooted in self-loathing and fear, not malice, but it could have destroyed everything Lupin had fought for, and it serves as a sharp reminder that even the bravest people can make terrible choices when they let their inner demons win. But the war was not done testing loyalties. The final battle was coming, and soon Harry would be faced with an ultimatum that would decide the fate of everyone he loved. What would he do when Voldemort gave him a choice that no one should ever have to make? That moment is coming next. Remus Lupin stood in the cold of the tent, trying to talk himself into abandoning his unborn child and his wife. And the sheer desperation of that moment tells you everything you need to know about the state of the war. When a man as fundamentally good as Lupin can convince himself that running away is the nobler option, you understand that hope has become a scarce resource. But he stayed. He chose to go back. And that choice, made in the dark of a miserable night, is a faint spark of the loyalty that will soon face its most terrible test. Because within hours, that loyalty will be the only weapon left. The Battle of Hogwarts erupts like a storm that has been building for years. Spells fly, walls crumble, and the dead begin to pile up on both sides. It is chaos, but is a chaos driven by purpose. The defenders are fighting for survival, for their school, for the families they have already lost. And then in the middle of it all, the fighting stops. Voldemort's voice cuts through the noise, amplified by magic, carrying across the battlefield. He offers a truce. 1 hour. 1 hour for Harry Potter to surrender himself. And in that moment, Voldemort makes a strategic blunder that he will never understand, because he misreads the single most important trait in his enemy. He believes Harry's nobility is a weakness. He thinks Harry will walk out to spare the lives of others, and he is absolutely certain of this, because he himself would never make such a choice. For Voldemort, power is the only currency. Sacrifice is foolishness. And so he gives the defenders an hour of peace, confident that he is about to win the war in a single, clean stroke. But Voldemort does not realize what he is handing over. That hour is not just a deadline, it is a gift. Time to breathe, time to mourn the fallen, time to gather the living in the Great Hall and decide what kind of final stand they can make. And most importantly, that hour is a window for Neville Longbottom. Neville has spent years growing into the man he was always meant to be. But he has never had a moment like this. While the defenders reorganize, while Harry wrestles with the impossible weight of his own survival, Neville slips away. He has seen the sword of Gryffindor, the one that appeared in the Sorting Hat when he stood against his friends in the Chamber of Secrets. And now, with the hour ticking down, he finds it, the sword, the weapon that can destroy Horcruxes. He does not know the full picture. He does not know that Nagini is the final link to Voldemort's immortality, but he knows the sword matters. And when the hour ends and the battle resumes, Neville will be ready. He will stand against the Death Eaters. He will face Voldemort's serpent. He will pull the sword from the hat and strike a blow that shatters the last Horcrux, even as the world burns around him. But all of that happens because of that 1 hour, that pause, that moment when Voldemort looked at Harry's and called it a weakness, when in truth it was the very thing that would destroy him. And in that same hour, another decision is being made, one that will rely on a different kind of nobility, a mother's love, a lie that will save the world and set the stage for the final confrontation. Because when Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest, he will not be alone. He will be followed by a woman whose loyalty to her son outweighs everything else, and her choice will turn Voldemort's victory into ash. Voldemort's hour has passed. The defenders of Hogwarts have used that final pause to prepare for the worst, to whisper goodbyes, to stack spells and barricades against the inevitable. And now the Dark Lord walks into the Forbidden Forest with an army of Death Eaters, giants, and Dementors at his back. He believes he has won. He believes that Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the boy who defied him 7 times, is finally dead. But the truth is that Voldemort's greatest weakness has never been his power, his cruelty, or even his fractured soul. It is his utter inability to understand a mother's love. That love, after all, is what destroyed him the first time. Lily Potter's sacrifice turned a killing curse into a protective shield, and that impulse, the willingness to die for a child, is the one thing Voldemort cannot replicate or predict. He knows the words. He has heard the prophecy. He has studied the old magic of blood and bond, but he has never felt it, and that blind spot will undo him again at the very moment he believes he has finally triumphed. So when Harry falls in the Forbidden Forest, struck by the killing curse in the clearing, where the Order of the Phoenix once stood, Voldemort does what any strategist would do. He sends a subordinate to confirm the kill, and he chooses Narcissa Malfoy. On the surface, it is a reasonable choice. Narcissa is a pure-blood matriarch, loyal to the Dark Lord's cause, with a son who fights us alongside the Death Eaters. She has no reason to betray him. She is terrified of him. Her hands tremble when she approaches. Voldemort watches her bend over Harry's body, and he expects confirmation. He expects her to say the boy is dead. That is what fear produces, obedience. But Voldemort forgot one thing. Narcissa Malfoy is a mother first and a Death Eater second. Her loyalty to the Dark Lord has always been secondary to her love for Draco, and in that moment, crouched in the forest, with leaves crunching under her knees, she presses a hand to Harry's chest and feels a heartbeat, a faint, steady pulse. The boy is alive. What does she do? She does not shout a warning. She does not cry out in surprise. Instead, she makes a choice that will reshape the final battle. She whispers to Harry, barely audible, asking if Draco is alive inside Hogwarts. And when Harry whispers back that he is, Narcissa makes her lie. She stands, looks Voldemort in the face, and says, "Dead." It is the single most consequential lie of the war. Voldemort believes her. He celebrates. He parades Harry's body back to the castle, thinking he has won, thinking the final obstacle is gone. But because Narcissa chose her son over her master, Harry is alive, and he will rise again. Think about the layers here. Voldemort trusted Narcissa precisely because he thought her maternal instinct was irrelevant. He saw her as a tool, a frightened woman who would follow orders. He did not consider that the bond between mother and child is stronger than any vow of fealty. He could not imagine that love might override fear, and because he could not imagine it, he overlooked it. He handed the victory to his own enemy by outsourcing the confirmation to the one person whose loyalty was conditional. Narcissa's lie allows Harry to return to the castle for the final confrontation. It is the reason Voldemort enters the Great Hall not as a conqueror but as a fool, holding a dead boy who is about to stand up. And when Harry does stand, when the defenders see him alive, the momentum shifts. The battle is no longer a siege, it is a rally. The Death Eaters waver. Voldemort, for all his power, is suddenly vulnerable. So the dumbest decision here is not just that Voldemort trusted the wrong person, it is that he fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the people he ruled. He built an army of followers bound by fear, but he never accounted for the one force that fear cannot suppress: a mother's love for her child. That miscalculation, as simple and profound as the one that brought him down in 1981, gave Harry the split second he needed to survive and to win. And yet, even as the scales tip, even as Narcissa's lie echoes through the castle corridors, the story is not over. Voldemort still holds the Elder Wand. He still believes he is the master of it, and he still has one more moment of hubris ahead of him. A moment so blind, so arrogant, that it will finally end everything. That moment begins with a duel, but it is not the duel you might expect. It is the final, fatal misunderstanding of a wizard who never learned that power without understanding is just another kind of weakness. Up next, the final duel hubris. The previous chapter ended with Narcissa Malfoy lying to Voldemort, telling him Harry was dead. That lie brought Harry a brief moment of safety, but it also set the stage for the final confrontation. And so, as the Battle of Hogwarts raged on, Voldemort brought Harry's seemingly lifeless body back to the castle, a twisted trophy to break the defenders' spirits. He had every reason to believe he had finally won. The boy who lived appeared to be dead. The Elder Wand was his, and the war was over. Of course, appearances are deceiving, especially when you ignore the fundamental rules of magic. Harry was not dead. He had, in fact, walked willingly into death, sacrificing himself to protect everyone he loved. And because of that sacrifice, the protection of Lily Potter's blood still flowed in Voldemort's veins, anchoring Harry to life. The killing curse that Voldemort had cast in the Forbidden Forest had only destroyed the fragments of Voldemort's soul inside Harry. The real Harry, the boy himself, had simply chosen to come back, and so he pulled himself up from the ground, covered in dust and silence, and made his way through the abandoned castle to face his enemy one last time. The scene that unfolded in the Great Hall is one of the most iconic moments in the entire series. But it is also one of the most infuriatingly predictable. Voldemort stood there, triumphant, basking in the applause of his Death Eaters, when Harry emerged from the shadows. The shock on Voldemort's face lasted only a second before it was replaced by fury. He had already cast the killing curse on Harry twice before, once in the graveyard at Little Hangleton, once in the Forbidden Forest, and both times it had failed. Yet here he was, about to attempt it for a third time. Now, you have to understand something about Voldemort's mind. He was not stupid. He was brilliant in many ways, deeply knowledgeable about magic, and capable of immense cunning. But his obsession with being the one to kill Harry clouded everything. He had convinced himself that the Elder Wand would be the key. He believed that by killing Snape, he had taken ownership of the most powerful wand in existence. He believed that this time, the curse would work. He refused to listen to reason, and that is the core of his hubris. Harry stood before him, not as a trembling victim, but as a calm, knowing adversary. He warned Voldemort outright. He said, "It's your one last chance. Try some remorse." But Voldemort would not hear it. Then Harry said the words that should have made every Death Eater in that hall stop and think. He told Voldemort that the Elder Wand did not belong to him. It belonged to its true master. And who was that? Draco Malfoy, who had disarmed Dumbledore in the Astronomy Tower, and who had disarmed Draco? Harry in the skirmish at Malfoy Manor. The wand's allegiance had shifted, and Voldemort, for all his obsession with power, had completely missed the nuance. But again, Voldemort ignored the warning. He had to believe that he was the master of the Elder Wand. His entire identity, his entire plan rested on that one premise. So he raised the wand, pointed at Harry and screamed, "Avada Kedavra," and then the most beautiful thing happened. The spell did not kill Harry. Instead, it rebounded. The Elder Wand, recognizing its true master, refused to harm Harry. The killing curse turned back on Voldemort, and he was struck by his own magic. He fell to the ground, a mortal man at last, broken by his own pride. It was not just the third time the curse had failed. It was the third time Voldemort had forced the issue, ignoring every sign, every lesson, every warning. His obsession with being the one to kill the boy who lived became the very thing that killed him. He could have ordered any of his Death Eaters to do it. He could have used any other spell. He could have waited, planned, or even tried to understand the wand's true loyalty, but he could not, because his ego would not allow it. And so the final duel ended not with a dramatic clash of spells, but with a logical conclusion. Voldemort's hubris had built a trap, and he walked straight into it. The Hogwarts defenders watched in stunned silence as the Dark Lord's body crumpled and the war was over. This is the lesson that echoes through all 28 of the dumbest decisions we have covered. Pride, obsession, and a refusal to listen to the truth. Voldemort had every advantage. He had power, followers, and a near immortal soul, but he could not see past his own need to be the one to destroy Harry. And that blindness cost him everything. As the sun rose over Hogwarts, the survivors began to piece together what had happened. But for Voldemort, there would be no second chances, no redemption, no return. The 30-year cycle of terror had finally come to an end, not because Harry was stronger or faster or smarter, but because Voldemort made the same mistake over and over again. He thought killing was the answer, and he thought the rules of magic were subordinate to his will. They were not. And that, perhaps, is the most comforting truth of all. In the end, the wizarding world survived not because of a single heroic act, but because evil's own arrogance carried the seeds of its destruction. Voldemort believed he had mastered death, but he never understood life. And so, when the final curse left his wand, it was not Harry who fell, it was Voldemort himself. Undone by the very obsession that had driven him from the start. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.